All right, so in this section, we saw how we can actually start saving some of these values in calculations that we compute to variables, right? And it's very simple, right? So if we want to go ahead and assign a value to a variable, such as here we want to have d equals to 1,000, right? We can do that with d, and we can see if we were to evaluate d, right, we would see that output. Okay, so we are saving this value to this variable. Okay, and we also saw some pretty cool stuff that we can do as far as incrementing or changing that value, right? So say we wanted to take d, which is here 5,000, or excuse me, 1,000, and we wanted to have d equal to the value of d, right, plus let's say 500. Now, if we looked at what d is after that, we now have 1,500. Now, another way we could do that is, let's say we want to increment d again, right? And we actually want to do this so that we add another 500. We could do d plus equals 500, right? And when we do this, again, we increment again, right? So, this is not necessary. It's just a kind of a shorthand approach to incrementing or adjusting the value of an existing variable. But you also see this fairly common as well. So the choice is yours. Just realize that that is kind of a shortcut. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at this knowledge check. We wanted to basically create, let's see, it looks like 3 variables, d, k, and h. So we have d equal to 1,000, k is supposed to be equal to 5, and then h is equal to 0.05. Right, so we now have 3 variables. An important thing to realize is that Python is case sensitive, right? So you can see here we have capital D, capital K, lowercase h. So if you were to look for a lowercase d value, right, that doesn't exist. It says here name d is not defined, right? Because it is expecting that d is uppercase, right? So it is case sensitive. Just keep that in mind. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at number 2 here. Compute 2 times d times k, right? So fairly simple here. We want to take 2 times d times k. When we execute that, we see we get 10,000. But now it says, let's do the same thing, except we want to divide that by h. Right? So now here, because of the order of operations, I don't need to use parentheses. Right? I could do it this way, where I take 2 times d times k. That's all going to be evaluated sequentially, and then take that result divided by h. You can see if we were to put parentheses around the numerator, right, we still get the same output, right, because it follows the order of operations. Okay, the next thing says, now put this together to compute the economic order quantity, which is the square root of what we just computed, right? And save the output as Q. Well, here's the thing. What we could do is apply the square root function to this output and try to calculate that. But it says there is no square root function, okay? So we would have to maybe do a little bit of Google search and look for what type of internal library we can use to get this, right? And so we would find that, let's say, if I were to Google this, square root function in Python, right? You're going to get a few different things, and you're going to see all these would lead to the same thing, which basically gets to that there is this internal math library, which we've seen before in some of the other lessons, and it has a dot square root method to it, right? So what I could do is import math, and then I could do math dot square root, and now I compute the square root. Okay, so I could actually save this, ask me to save this to the output Q, which I do. And then number 5 just says, all right, what is the type and the value of Q? Well, I can look at the value is 447.21 in many decimals, which should indicate that if I use type, this is a floating point value, a floating point object, because it's a decimal value. All right, so the last thing it says, execute del q. What do you think this does? All right, so let's go ahead and run this, del q. You can see that our highlighting kind of made this bold and kind of made it stand out. That's because this is what we call a keyword within Python, and it executes a certain kind of functionality. And so if we were to run that, right, it executes, it doesn't provide us any output. But now let's go ahead and see what Q is. And I see Q is not defined, right? So this is a way that we can actually delete objects that we are no longer interested in, okay? Or if it's something we want to make sure we get rid of so we don't confuse it with later computations, we can do that explicitly by using the del, the delete keyword, and then whatever object it is that we want to delete.